Good morning. Well, it's morning in Tucson. This is Donna Reed. I am with Up With People, cast 76A. And this morning, I am super fortunate to be talking to the brilliant David Mackay, who it's afternoon for him. You probably need to be having tea, right, Dave? It's about that time for you.
I like the brilliant. That's great.
Brilliant. And you're
Are you to be brilliant?
Tea would be great. Are you at your home in London?
Yep.
Is that where
Yeah.
are?
Yeah.
Wonderful. So just before I started recording, I told you that I know your name, I know a little bit about you, but I don't know a lot about you. And it's truly those musicians that a lot of us know from the band Arizona and kind of from the early days that know you, Dave. So tell the Up With People world who's listening your affiliation, how you came to be involved with Up With People.
Well, this goes back to, golly, 1970, 71.
Okay.
Up With People had a recording deal with a company in New York called, I think it was Buddha Records, and they were affiliated to Phonogram over here in England. And they had a cast doing a tour, a charity tour for Prince Charles and Princess Anne's charities. And I think it was a small cast of around about 15 to 18 people. And so I had this call from the record company saying, would I go and meet this group? And they want me to record a single to release in the UK. So I went along and I met at Marble Arch in a big apartment. There were around about 18 of them there. The cast directors were Hans and Tova Magnus, and the cast were a group that was led by there was Dick Smith, John Tracy, Frank Fields, that lovely girl singer whose name escapes me now. It's going to drive me mad. But there were about 18 of them. And so I walked into this room and there are all these kids sitting around with guitars and stuff. And I said, hey, great. Well, sing me your songs. So they sang for around about an hour, all these different songs. And they were really, really very, very good. And so I went back to the record company and said, look, these guys are great, but I don't think there's a single, but there would be a really nice album. And they said, well, an album's pretty expensive. I said, I could do an album in a day, do it as a live album, just get them in the studio and get friends in to make an audience and just give them some wine and biscuits and stuff. And we'd put on a show in a recording studio. And that's what we did. We rehearsed in the afternoon. And then in the evening, a bunch of friends came along, sat around, had a drink, and I said, right, we're going to record this album now, and you're the audience, and off we go. And we did this show, and it was called Live It Live in London, and it's still a great album. It's a lovely album, some wonderful songs in it. And Linda, so she was the girl. She was the lovely, lovely singer. And
does that name sound right? Linda Cates?
Yes, Linda Cates, indeed. Yeah,
right.
Married to Bill. Yes.
Yeah.
Who I didn't meet until many years later. I met him at the big reunion in Florida.
In Orlando. Nice.
In Orlando, and so they're a great group. And when we finished the recording, Frank and Hans came and said, look, next time you're in America, would you be able to swing by Arizona and meet the people who run the organization? So I said, yeah, I'll be over in America soon, I'm sure. And so it was a few months later, I was over there. We were doing some TVs with the New Seekers in Los Angeles. And once that was finished, I said, well, I'm free. So I contacted them and I flew in to meet them in Tucson, and met Blanton Belk and Don Birdsall and Jack Hips, and they took me out to lunch and told me all about the organization and what they do. And they said they'd love me to see a show and see if we could work together on future things. So they flew me up to Seattle to see a show. and that was where I met all the Corbels and Herb, and that was the first. That was the first thing, and we chatted and we got on really well. And they said, "Well, would you come back and do a staging with us?" So I said, "Well, when would that be?" And I think it was well, it was probably 1971 or 72 in Vermont. I'm not sure which, whether it was one or two. And that's where I met new boys in the show: Pat Murphy, Bob Hart,
Yeah.
with all that group. And
Willie Knowles, those guys.
Willie was
Yeah.
in there, yeah. And I think Mary Dobbins was there. And so that was my first staging. And so basically we've worked from then until still do things for them.
So Dave, let me ask you a couple of questions based on this. So do you remember who the very first person was that even contacted you for the London piece? Like, I think about me, how would I even know who to call to ask about this?
Well, the record company,
Okay.
they were the connection, and I was having success with the New Seekers, which were a vocal group, and
Okay.
so they thought, well, who will we get to produce this group? And
Okay.
they contacted me and said, "Would you go and have a look?" And that was basically how it happened.
All right. And then when you went to Seattle, because the group that had come to England was such a small group, were
Yeah.
you seeing a much bigger show when you went to Seattle?
Yeah, that was a full production, yes. And in fact, they
Okay.
were about to record another album, another live album, at the time. I think with Tommy Scott was producing that.
Okay.
They were doing that shortly after. And so that was basically, we just said, they said, "Well, look, we need somebody to work with us on the the staging of the musical numbers, and looking at the production of the whole thing, so that which was great. It was fun to do. It was really good fun to do, and
Yeah.
and we got on really well, and it's been going ever since.
Okay. So then did you end up then just collaborating through the years? Did you end up help producing, I've talked to Bob Huff and I haven't had a chance. I kind of want to get all the Arizona people together that I can, but
Right.
making that happen is a challenge, trying to get 4 or 5 people together at the same time. But Bob told me a little bit of their history about how they were kind of first threw up with people and then they had to be separate, and they weren't. So did you end up helping with any of those albums at the during when the Arizona guys were playing and stuff like that?
Yeah, the first I did an album in New Mexico,
Okay.
for Up With People, and I can remember Bucky Wright was the show manager, and that we had to pick which group was going to be the group, the cast that we recorded. So I'd seen 3 different casts at staging, and
Okay.
had to decide on which would be the cast that would be best to make the record. And I just said, whichever cast Bucky Wright is with will be the best, because he was a show manager who would stick to the script and to make it work, build it and build it and build it. Whereas other guys will get in there and they'll start changing things. So that was the way I went. But I'd pulled out certain people like Willie Knowles, Bob Half, Pat Murphy, and Doug Holsworth, and I said, I need those guys to be the nucleus of the band and some of the singers. And so we brought them in for that. And through that, the idea came out some years later that you had these great talents within the groups, and it would be a really great idea to form a group with some of the cream of the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's basically where the idea of Arizona came out.
Yeah.
And then, of course, so Up With People agreed to run it as a sort of like a separate cast. But then after a while, it needed to build its own legs and stand on its own 2 feet. And so we got through that. I went and got a record deal with RCA. And so they became basically separate, but always,
Active.
would be part of Up With People, but of course they were
Yeah.
running a separate group.
Those of us that were students in, so my year was 76, those of us that were students then that would come here, they were often playing down at the DoubleTree. So
Yes.
people have a lot of memories of going to the DoubleTree when they were here. So, and David, I'm from a tiny town in Ohio. I think the only alumni from my town. And if I hadn't moved to Arizona, I wouldn't know as many of these people as I do, because it's been since I've lived here that I helped with reunions and got to know, more of their stories, and doing this has been interesting. So one of the things that I typically ask people during these is if there is a song or two where the words, the lyrics still resonate with you. And you mentioned that first album. Is there anything, I know you've done a ton of music in your life, so this might be racking your brain, but are there any specific songs that you feel like just maybe are still relevant today that were recorded?
Oh, golly, there's many of them. I mean, obviously people always remember Roads because it was such a powerful piece.
Yeah.
And when I first saw Willie do that with Karen, that really impressed me. One of my favorite songs, funny enough, it came up at the reunion. When one of the things I'm really pleased about is the award that I got to join the Up With People Hall of Fame. And at the same time, Bill Cates was being inducted. And I'd never met Bill before. I knew all about him from Paul and Steve and Ralph and Herb, always talking about Bill and Linda. And so suddenly I met him, and we were sitting at the reunion, and he said, I wrote a song for Up With People. He said, and I said, this girl sang this song of mine. He said, I've got to play it to you. I've got to play it to you. So I said, oh, okay, that's great. So he found it on his little Walkman thing and gave me the headphones. He says, have a listen to how good this record is. And it was Mary Dobbins singing There's to an old man. Da, 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 da. Oh,
Yeah.
So
with everything changing.
With everything changing. And I said, I produced that record. I did that record. He said, you're joking. So, but that's always been one of my favorite Up With People songs, because it was just one of those magical moments, that song, that record.
It is. It's funny because when I do these, so many people know Roads because it's been redone through the years and it's had different endings. In Mexico it ended big, and then it was a little more modern. And every once in a while we joke about we should do all the songs that nobody remembers for some reason, because they were either silly or they were very much of the time. And in my show we did I Don't Want to Rule the World, and I've teased Paul that I just thought that was the silliest song. And he said, he goes, they can't all be award winners, Donna. And yet when you go, it's kind of like, for me, this is going to sound amusing, but if any of us try to pick apart why the Beatles wrote what they wrote, like, what's this walrus thing? You try to figure out what they were writing or doing. So, Paul said to me, he said, Donna, at that point in the 70s, there were a lot of people that wanted to rule the world. It was a time when, and so then you get a little bit of an idea about why a song came to fruition, as compared to just, I thought our motions were silly or whatever that we had to do. So, David, clearly, you're at a board this morning, it may be in a home studio or something. So tell the listeners, especially my son traveled in 2013, he's 35. So tell those kids that are listening about what you do now, because just fitting this into your busy schedule is a challenge. So share with us what you're doing now.
Well, I'm still producing records. The artist that I'm producing at the moment is Bonnie Tyler, who she's performing all over the world at the moment. In fact, I saw her night before last for dinner, and her fleeting journey into England for one night before she's now off to Brazil touring South America, and then she gets back here and tours Europe again up until Christmas. So fitting
Wow.
her recordings in is rather difficult. I keep working on the stuff and until she can get here, and she comes into this room here and we record her vocals. And I've got a couple of touring stage shows that I've produced, that are going around the UK and Europe at the moment, and just been asked to do yet another one. And I'm just getting to the stage where I say, oh, I just want to sit down and read a book. But
Yeah.
it's fun, and I've been lucky recently. I've been doing some cruises, and
Oh,
doing talks on the cruises, which is about my career, about the people I've produced over the years, and then
fun.
the shows, you know.
So are you doing those around? Are you doing cruises all over? Or are you kind of sticking to the UK and European?
Oh no, the first one I did was in Australia, from Australia up to Bali, and then I did one last Christmas or New Year at in Barbados, around the West Indies, and I've just done one around the UK, which I've never done before. We just spent 2 weeks going around the UK, and that was a really nice cruise. So
Oh,
we
then
just
a
talked.
place where you live, but maybe see it from a different
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah, I've never done that before, so that was quite nice. I really enjoy doing that because it's fun to do the talks, because you know you can talk about the shows, and also talk about the TV things that I've done, and special projects. And
Yeah.
of course I also talk about it with people in those shows as well, which is quite fun.
Yeah, yeah, it is. So there's an artist named Benjamin Scheuer who's living in London right now, and my son introduced him to me based on, well, it was a Disney thing, a 1 hour show about his life, and it's he and 6 guitars, and we
Oh,
just, yeah, we just met. You'll have to look him up. Yeah, the show is called The
hmm.
Lion. I just met the young actor in Tucson, and tomorrow my son's going to meet the actor that's playing his part. It's a one-man show, and
All right.
his name is Max, and he's also from the UK, and he's performing that show. And for my son who had cancer during COVID, there's a song called
Oh,
"Weather the Storm," and
oh wow.
that song became synonymous with not just my son Caleb and his story about sickness, but about everything related to what we've been going through for the last couple of years, where
Yeah, yeah,
everybody had to weather the storm in a different way. And
indeed. Yeah.
it didn't necessarily feel like you were walking uphill in the snow to school, like the stories we tell children and grandchildren, but it's still, and we're still there, we're still doing that. So it's wonderful that music is back and that people are touring, and that a little bit, I don't know, did you have a pause during COVID at all with what you were doing?
Yeah, yes, it sort of brings things back home to roost in a way, you know, when you're spending that time sort of reflecting on things. I mean, how is your son's cancer? Is that good now? Is that
He's
okay?
doing, yep, he was cut from sternum to pelvis, and he's doing amazingly well. And he's in Denver, which is, I call the retirement spot for the younger alumni, because after they move
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
so he has a great support system with some of the people that he traveled with
All right,
and
yeah.
everything. So
Yeah,
yeah,
there's a
yeah,
good gang over there in that part of the world, aren't there? Sort of.
yeah, yeah. That Tucson and Denver have a whole lot of
Yeah,
uppies. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I also just recently met the new CEO. So have
All
you
right.
seen or heard anything about what the future of Up With People?
I've just had emails and things like that, which I've had a chance to read, but I've been running around chasing my tail, so I haven't really sort of
Yeah,
settled down and sort of taken it all in really. But
yeah,
I still hear obviously from the guys, particularly the guys in Tucson, from
yeah,
Bob and from Steve Bukowski and people like that,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and I'm still in touch with Willie all the time, and Paul and Steve. So it's
yeah,
I get to know what's going on,
yeah.
but it's a bit of a distance.
Well, and none of us know what it's going to be. And I actually have a Zoom with the CEO here in a little while, about here. We have our first non-alumni, a woman born in India. So an entirely different look. And for those of us old timers, we have to understand change. And I kind of laugh to myself because you continue to say record, and I wonder, is there a hard record that gets made, or is that just jargon that we know from the past?
Mm, yeah.
Because as the future, we don't know what the future is. They're trying to envision it. And yet I don't think it'll be anything like what we did in the
No,
70s.
it's just that everything, technology is changing things so fast, you know, one
Right,
just doesn't know. I mean, you know, records are becoming a thing of the past, although
right,
they still have to be made. Otherwise, there's no music for people to hear.
right.
So we still record. It's just a matter of what they hear it on and how they hear it. And of course, can we keep making records if record sales aren't there, that the people who are making them are not going to make a living out of it,
Right.
then it's a vicious circle. But nothing is really set now. It's all about streaming and things like that, and there's lots of things that are going on that need to be sorted out. We need to be making more records and bringing more talent through, but we're not, because of these mindlessly numbing TV shows looking for stars that they want an immediate success. The idea of actually growing talent and nurturing talent and teaching them the craft so that they can go out and perform doesn't exist anymore. They want something immediate, you know, it has to be a hit
Yeah,
straight away, you know. It's unrealistic, and
yeah,
that's why we're not making lots of exciting stars. You're getting
yeah.
very few who are massive,
Right.
but it's not spreading, and it's not you know, we're just not doing what we should be doing, nurturing more talent.
Just, I think about a couple of the musicians from the cast that I traveled with, one who's been a drummer in Vegas forever and has been able to make a living as a drummer in Vegas, right?
Right.
And someone else who, but another drummer, we had two different drummers our year, and the other one is in kind of in the Austin area, and he's also played drums his whole life, and he's been able to do that and support himself, you know, because a drummer can play in different bands, different times and things. But for the writers, my middle son is a songwriter, and he is very dismayed that his mother can sing songs but has no idea who wrote them because he thinks that's shameful for the artists who wrote them, and he's probably right. But you know, you sing a song enough, you know all the lyrics, you don't always know who did it. So
No.
I want to ask you one other thing, because you said you're doing some stage shows. What does that mean? What, when you say that to me, what?
Well, there's a demand, particularly over here, for one-nighters, for traveling, and a lot of them are sort of based. They're sort of for a one-nighter, basically, you know, they're either tributes and things like that. So,
Okay.
but because they're in theaters, not in pubs, you know,
Mhm.
lots of tribute shows in pubs, but when you put it into a theater, that has to have sort of production value. So
Ah,
one of them I'm doing is called It's a Beautiful Noise, and it's all the music of Neil Diamond. But it's not where you just get up and sing a song and people applaud. I mean, the opening sequence of that is an overture that leads into film, and you know, basically you get to know the breadth of the writing in the first number that goes for around about 11 minutes before the audience get a chance to applaud. So it becomes a more of a theatrical production of the music of a particular artist. And so there's a few of those. I've done one for an Elvis Presley tribute show, which is, you know, there's loads of Elvis Presley tributes where people just get up and sing an Elvis Presley song and they put the gear on and that's it, you know. And but that's not a theater production, you know. So you have to then figure out how can you make it a theater production so that there's value in it. So if you're sitting in an audience, you
yeah,
want to, you know, clap along and things like that. You can still do all that, but you want to come out of it with just not just saying, "Oh, I went to the pub and that guy sang a lot of Elvis songs," you know.
yeah, yeah. That's okay. I just wanted to clarify that. One of the other things that I ask almost everyone is this, and this might be a little different for you, but in your travels, whether with Up With People or anywhere else, did you ever eat something that you never want to eat again? Or did you ever eat something for the first time that you absolutely love and now you embrace it?
there's there's one thing I can't eat, and it's because of Paul Corwell. We often talk about this. Paul has these allergies, which you're probably not aware of, and there was one stage where he would eat two things only. One was porridge, and of course over here, porridge is very big, particularly in Scotland and places like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And his breakfast would be porridge, but he would have 3 or 4 bowls of porridge. And I can remember we were in a hotel, and he ordered 4 bowls of porridge, and the chef came out of the kitchen because he said, "I have to see this man that's eating 4 bowls of porridge." So I find it difficult to eat porridge. And the other thing was zucchini. He would we'd be traveling around, and we'd be in a hotel, and I'd go into his room, and have a little burner there and a little saucepan, and he'd be cooking zucchinis, and the smell of that in a little room, that did me in for life. So when my wife cooks things like that, I say, "Look, sorry, I can't eat the zucchini." But it's all because of Paul Corwell. It's his fault. It's his fault that I'm a bad eater.
Great thing like the smell and the memories. So that's awesome. What about traveling? Is there any place that you haven't been that would still be on a bucket list for you that you want to go?
Oh yes. I mean, the Maldives, I really want to go. I was supposed to do a cruise from Singapore to Hong Kong, going through to Vietnam and all that area, and
Yeah.
I'd really love to do that.
That would
But
be,
that was cancelled because of COVID, so which was a great shame, because I was really looking forward to that. But
yeah.
no, I love traveling. Um, I haven't been to America for quite some time. I'm hoping that in the next few months that I'll be able to get across there. And I'll always go to Tucson, and
Well, please, if you come, I would love to see you and say hello. I know where Bob lives, and I live northwest side, so not crazy far from,
right, Bob.
yeah, Bob Huff.
Yeah. So no, I mean, we always sort of try, if we get to America, we always make sure we get to Arizona.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a fascinating experience for me here, and has changed my life, because as a bicentennial cast member, we only had 6 non-Americans in the cast. We had to make up countries for people.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
I started in 76, so that 75, 76 group had just been all over the States, and there were tons of Americans. And
Yeah.
if I hadn't been here at Reunion, served on the Board of Governors, I wouldn't have some of the contacts that I have, in
Yeah.
Europe and other places around the world. So for me, it's been a great experience coming back and living back here and
Yeah. Oh, yes.
getting to know other people. So
And
as we wrap it up, any words, I kind of always ask this too, that if there's a 24-year-old that's thinking about what they want to do for a year, now we have couch surfing, and they just backpack, and hostels, and all these different things. But if the new Up With People, which is going to be a shorter program, becomes an option, what might you say to that young man or woman about why this would be good for them?
well, if it's still the same premise where you're staying with families in different towns, and you're meeting with a group of people, I mean, obviously with the bigger cast, it was great because you got a lot more influences and a lot more countries involved. But living with families, as you go from town to town, and you're seeing that town and those people through your eyes, but also through the eyes of somebody from a completely different country, you're developing an understanding of the world, and hopefully a more compassionate view of the world, so that when you go to troubled places, and you say, well, hang on, that place is the people there are lovely. It's not the people that are the problem. It's either the politicians or the greedy people or the evil people who want to change things for the worst, but you have an understanding of that world, which is really what we just want. We want to live in peace. We want to live happily. We
Right.
want to help one another. Doesn't matter what religion you are, what color you are. The thing is, we're all human beings, and
Yeah.
what's not to love about people?
Yeah, that's good. Then we could say up with people, right?
Exactly. That's what
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So, well, thank you very much for taking the time. I will save it to, I don't edit it at all. After I talked to Carol and Lee, she was like, I said things that in writing you have time to critique before you post it.
She's lovely, Carolyn.
But
Yeah.
I appreciate these stories. I think it's important to save the stories, and for the younger people, we have about 22,000, 23,000 alumni to
Wow.
get a chance to learn from each other. And I think this is my 26th or 27th interview. So I just keep doing them when I can. Yeah.
Great.
And
Very good.
would love to meet you in person when you're in Arizona sometime. And
Well, I'm hoping it won't be too long.
good. The world's open a little bit more again, you know.
Indeed,
So, yeah,
thankfully.
yeah. All righty, I'm gonna wrap this up, and then I'll have just like another minute or so with you, but I'm gonna stop the recording. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, David.